Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to go through my final design project for my first year architecture masters. My final design project for first year masters is an overall manifesto scheme that aimed to use all the research and analysis I showed you guys in both part 1 and part 2, and the name I gave my scheme was the Center for Climate Change and Natural Disasters. And in this report, I'll be going through my project introduction, the brief, research and logistics, my drawings, some environmental and technical work, and finally some visuals. The introduction of this project is very similar to the one I proposed in the outline brief and outline design, as they're all working together to collectively meet the needs of the city and to work to create an alternative democracy for the city of Rome. And the clients remain the same, being the City Council of Rome, the EU, and COP26. I've also included a list of requirements which I featured in the outline brief, which include political, scientific, leisure, transportation, and other services. Data for the next 100 years has predicted that Rome will see an increase in temperature, sea level, and CO2 emissions, which will see areas such as agriculture, the hydrological system, and the quality of air, and people's lives and livelihoods all being negatively affected by the impacts. Therefore, I've proposed a series of actions with a proposal to then lead to the mitigation of the threats the climate will pose in the future. My project brief is divided into 3 sections: environmental systems and strategies, architectural manifesto, and hybrid conditions. And for the environmental systems and strategies, I've stated that the scheme must respond through winter conditions, must provide an architectural response during summer conditions. The centre must also respond to the direct narrative of the River Tiber with challenges such as overflooding presented to the site, the crucial management and control of water both within the River Tiber but also rainwater. For the architectural manifesto, the scheme must be responding to the urgent challenges of climate change, integrating systems and strategies to respond and provide a better environment for users of the space, produce a scheme which becomes a precedent from which the future of design within the city of Rome and the world can take inspiration from to improve the global environment and raise the quality of life. And finally, for the architectural manifesto, to design a scheme which is a generator and producer and not a consumer of energy, working with the pre-stated strategies to create a cleaner and greener scheme which removes strain from the local energy grid. And for the hybrid conditions, factors which must be considered include the conditions of the River Tiber, the scheme to be designed in a way and in a manner which is responsive to current and future context and climate, exploring and expanding the use of MEP systems to operate the episodes within the scheme, and designing a scheme which responds to the typology of the environment it's situated in and with the needs and experiences of the end user strongly considered throughout. Research elements which we've seen in previous reports I've made include the topographical and temperature analysis map, the macro scale analysis of Italy showing the carbon emissions, transport analysis of the city of Rome, flooding and how certain areas are more prone to floods than others in relation to their surface level, hydrological analysis of the city, and extra research which we've seen in part 2, and now to identify the surrounding context within my chosen site area and how the segment of the river is in close proximity to St. Peter's, Castel St. Angelo and the Museo di Agosto, the Pantheon and more. The government buildings, relationship with the river, and site conditions and constraints which include restriction and natural growth, site levels, views into and out of the scheme, access from both sides of the bridge where my scheme is, traffic, and to strongly consider the richness of history that immediately surrounds my site. Highlighting sites which are located in and around my chosen location for which I aim to use to develop my architectural response. Materiality, which includes stone, marble, timber, brick, and Roman concrete, are all found around the existing context, in addition to the travertine marble, which is what the bridge is made out of, in addition to spanning the whole length of the river with 5 arches, and 3 of those actually being Roman arches. A quick identification of what's at the existing site and an initial site section to identify the sheer drop in levels from the pedestrian level where the Castel St. Angelo is and the Riverwalk. The preliminary proposal of functions shows me opening up the 5 list of requirements I mentioned earlier in the video, and how for the political function I explored into proposing offices, a place for officials to meet, an official House of Roma, and an emergency room which would see all leaders meeting privately for emergency matters. Transportation, which I had to consider the use of boats to access the scheme, the scientific requirement, which could include a research centre, a centre for hydrographic monitoring of the river, and a centre of global riverbank surveillance, with other services including storage, security, restrooms, and finishing this segment off with leisure, which includes a foyer, cafe, viewing decks, an underwater observatory, a museum of the history of Roman floods, and a lounge area. The schedule of accommodation, which sees these functions have some proportions added to them in this initial phase. An access and accessibility diagram which shows the entry points, pedestrian access, paths, walkways, and circulation flow, in addition to other factors which link to who can access the scheme, how the development would become a node of connection for the city, and the linking of the road, footpaths, and public spaces through and across the site. Fire safety information, where I've included the required documents from the UK building regulation and the layers of fire safety. And although my scheme is based in Rome, it's very important, being sort of studying at a university in the UK, to have these documents and to kind of show my initial understandings of how all the elements within the proposal, within the approved documents, can be related to my project. Early research and development showing how I take inspiration from different architects and their work, and how I'm then able to translate their drawings into my own scheme. And in this case, I've studied the work of Frank Gehry and Enric Moraes. The Steel Cloud project by Asymptote was the biggest precedent which had great influence on my project during the main development phase. Understanding the different structures which all contribute to the overall system, and how a mixture of voids and overlapping layers can provide incredible spaces for the users. And through this, I was able to assemble different episodes for the programs I wanted the project to include. And again, studying a range of projects by Coop Himmelblau, and how architectural tectonics and the expansion of structures will be vital for the outcomes I wish to propose and produce. Lebbeus Woods, of course, had to be included in my research. The parallels between society's physical and psychological construction was something that Woods depicted throughout his career, and for me to bring more elements of this into my own work was a huge must. In this page, I show the different series of modelling and testing I went through, so from early volumes to more defined spaces and forms. And again, interrogating the Steel Cloud really benefited my architectural designing, and how through multiple iterations, I was slowly beginning to see the outcomes of all these processes finally take place. The location plan on my scheme, the site plan, the plan of all the different episodes I designed, which include the residential part of the project, the council, the underwater observatory, the history of flooding museum, viewing platforms, the River Tiber monitoring lab, research centre, experimental hydrology lab, global hydrological monitoring, and the House of Roma. It's quite exhausting, like listing them all out now that the project's done, and like looking back on kind of all the different episodes that I designed. This is the north elevation of my scheme, which after spending hours trying to make it look like the style I wanted it finally came out to a visual that I'm pretty happy with, to be honest, and like showing all the levels and how these episodes are all working and connected as if they're part of this one big climate-friendly machine. I really wish I had more time to develop the section drawing. However, like the indication of the spaces within provides an idea for how the spaces would be used. But yeah, I really wish I had more time to develop this. So it's something I'm going to take into my final year project now. I then created this diagram to label each episode with what category they were more associated with. This includes social, educational, environmental, and political. And at the bottom of the page, I've stated some extra notes on how the scheme on each part is a climate change mitigation strategy. So a large water treatment machine which will treat tons of water each year, and it will produce hundreds of kilowatts of energy every year from PV. Again, a diagram to show the formation of each episode. Using Climate Consultant to identify strategies that can be implemented to provide greater thermal comfort. Environmental analysis, which includes a wind wheel to show where prevailing winds are coming from, a ground temperature chart throughout the year as well. Yearly wind velocity range, and finally temperature range as well. Then I decided to create diagrams for some of the episodes exploring more into the environmental factors, such as the residential unit, which will have water collection and reuse, a green wall, PV panels, urban farming walls, stilts for flooding, and an underground hydroelectric piston generated pillars for flooding too. And the council will have PV panels, rainwater collection, PV energy system, transportation and storage, and a water collection pipe system. The museum would also have PV panels and water collection and reuse, but it will also have the columns which rise depending on the level of water during flooding, and water nodes at the end of the ETFE panels to purify the air. The research centre will additionally have underground pipes for water treatment of the river. And the Global Hydrological Monitoring Lab will have a seismic structure to withstand seismic activity, further anchored support with seismic monitoring devices, also housed within the structure. And finally, the Experimental Hydrology Lab, which will have a green roof, adjustable louvers, cross-bracing, underground pipes for the river to access water to treat and test, and a green wall. And on this page, I've explored possible future strategies that I could implement in my scheme should I have had the chance to further develop the project. And these include air source heat pumps, wind turbines, hydroelectric power, and I discussed the pros and cons for each strategy. Researching and studying precedents such as the California Academy of Sciences by Renzo Piano Building Workshop and Stantec Architecture, in addition to the Farmhouse project. And for both schemes, I explore into their relevance for my project. The same is done for the Echo Boulevard and the Blur Building by Didascofidio and Renfro. And again, with the Media TIC in Barcelona and the New Energy Spaces by Tam Ashati. Structural considerations for my project saw me research into steel, CLT and concrete and explore their properties and how they're suitable for my scheme. Through which I then go on to explore structural precedents like the Ontario College of Art and Design, and then show my response in the bottom right to how I will apply these methods to my project. The Komatsu Materia offices in Japan, which have a carbon fiber based product for seismic reinforcing, which is placed along the perimeters of the building and anchored to the ground. And this same principle is seen where I've shown my response to using the strategy for my seismic structure of one of the episodes. Unfortunately, a not very well developed base section and elevation due to this being literally an additional thing that I wanted to include at the very end, literally probably like the day before the submission. I was like, I'm just going to quickly add this in. But the important thing was to get the main areas done of the project, and this was literally just a last minute kind of extra thing, which I don't really think affected the grade. But like going forward, I know that if I'm going to do this for my final year project, to put more time into it. I want a 20 detail section of the council which shows the materials and structure. I want a 5 detail of the ETFE panels that will be placed around the Museum of Flooding, and then again to show the relation to the precedent I studied and how the panels operate. And now for the best part of the visual, starting off with some aerial views. So we've got aerial view 1, the second aerial view, or go back quickly, the second aerial view, and the third one. Ground perspective visual, followed by another air view. The viewing deck, which also looks across the river, Tiber itself, and the rest of the development. And this quick one about movement through the episodes via bridges and paths that I designed. And the final visual, which shows a future visualization of the scheme and how the environment could take over and what could be inhabiting in these spaces that I designed. So it's really interesting to see how the river will not only develop, but how it will grow and evolve into a different kind of ecosystem within, and how my buildings and how the scheme itself will be adapting to the different species that will be inhabiting those spaces too. And I wanted to finish off with some photos of the model I made of the site, which include a hybrid of 3D printed elements through the bridge and the Castel St. Angelo, and a CNC milled foam board for the surrounding context. And I then coated the foam board in white paint to match the 3D printed elements to give it kind of a nicer aesthetic outcome. I then kind of used, not sure what type of clay it was, but some clay that dries really quickly just in normal air of the different episodes that I had. And I went to collect it from the uni, but I think they actually, I don't know what happened. Maybe they fell off or something, but I think they chucked it in the bin, which I was so annoyed about. Because it actually, I created quick, I know it was quick and everything, but like clay models of like the actual episodes for my building. And then I went to collect it from uni, and it wasn't there. So I think they either chucked it in the bin, or it just fell off, and like no one thought anything of it. Which is a bit disrespectful, but. But yeah, that's the last page of my final design project for first year masters. If you haven't already seen part 1 and part 2 of me going through my first year architecture masters design projects, then please click in the links in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video and part 1 and part 2, and I'll see you next time.